Welcome to a brand new episode of The Tribunal. How are you doing, sis?
I'm doing okay. How you doing, sis?
I'm doing good. I'm a little tired. I'm a little under the weather. No, it's not the Rona. But
It's
you
just the world and Mother Nature
mostly it's just
being
exhaustion.
her.
Mostly it's just exhaustion and allergies. So I am madly congested right now. Not just doing my DJ Khaled.
Another one.
And
And
another one.
hands you a tissue. Another one.
Yeah. So if I sneeze a lot, it's the allergesis. It's not anything
Bless
else.
you.
And another one. And another one. But we've got a really good topic this week. Not that we don't have good topics every week, but we have a really good topic this week. Like I've been looking forward to this conversation, like since we decided to do this topic this
I
week.
think it was one of the first ones we're like, oh, we really should do a deep dive on this and talk about it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's probably one of the ones like when we were first getting together and planning out content for Black and Pat for these tribunals and also for our hot takes. I think this is one of the topics when we all got together that we were like, oh, we got to do it for this and we got to do it for this. And we could do I could do an hour by myself on just this, which is exciting. So as you've noticed from the title of the stream, it's called I Feel Seen. And really, the conversation today is going to be about representation in TV, primarily for Black and Brown peoples, because we are Black and Brown peoples.
Yep.
And we've consumed a lot of media and have thoughts and opinions on the media that we've consumed and the media that we're available of, that has been available to us, I should say. Yeah.
That's more accurate.
And so I've really been looking forward to having this conversation with you because there's some things that I want to pick your brain about that I don't think that like together we've ever talked about, but definitely in pockets with other people and our friends like we have, and we've each gotten nuggets of it. So I think it's going to be a good conversation for today.
I completely agree on all on that. So
and I also have my tea over here. It is Pure Leaf TV tea. We are not sponsored by them, but you know,
not spawn.
Hashtag not a sponsor. Hashtag not an ad. Hashtag I just like this tea. Especially when I'm not feeling good. So don't mind me as I sip like a lot of tea during this hour. But
while we dish some tea, watch her sip some tea.
Right. I'm gonna sip my tea while we spill the tea, but not really because we have a lot of products around us and those are really expensive.
Agreed.
Yeah, let's get into it because there's a lot to talk about, I think. So, you know, this is one of the topics that you brought up initially, and I was kind of surprised that you picked this one this week. So I wanted to like first know just like why was this one like the burning one for you that you wanted to talk about?
So I mean, I think at the end of the day, you know, not that I'm saying I sit around all day and watch TV, but I am media forward. I am often in front of a screen. I think most people currently, especially right now, are very much in front of their screens, overly ingesting available media wherever they can get it. YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, well, not for very long here in America, possibly. You know, all these places where there's
TikTok is hot trash, but that's a different conversation.
But like all these places where things can be put in front of me for me to absorb and digest. So I've just kind of been sitting there looking at what I've been constantly consuming, and I just had this thought in my head where I mean, like when Blackish first came out, I was a little hesitant. TV show. I was very hesitant about jumping into it because I was like, I really do like this title. I feel like you're baiting me a little bit. Like I didn't want to be disappointed about what it was going to bring to the table. And then, so I waited some time before when it first dropped to start watching it. And then I was pleasantly surprised by what I got from it. Because I was anticipating that we were going to get kind of, you know, Cosby Show 2.0, and they were going to like lightly address topics without ever really going to a place that I felt a sitcom could go. that would
Okay.
open up more conversations about that. And believe it or not, I feel like Blackish did a really good job of not scaring the white folk, but also like
Mhm.
not overly hand holding and making it comfortable either. Like it was like, hey, here's this statement. Oh, you don't believe it's a statement? Here's the facts that prove that it's a statement. How do
Mm.
you feel about that? Like that's the way that they kind of approached it. So like I felt like this weight kind of come off of me. And I was like, oh, and I felt like, oh, like Blackish was made for people like me.
Well, let's dig into that because
It,
I find
it
that interesting. I find
when
that interesting, but I want to dig into it.
when I first saw it, that was my impression. I'm not saying
Okay.
that's what is my impression of it now. But when I
Okay.
first saw it, I was like, oh, okay. Here we
Okay.
go.
All right, because I do want to be fair, right?
Right.
Because when Blackish first aired, I think that there was very much a outcry from Black Twitter and big chunks of Black communities online that really felt or had conversations around it that it was kind of white-ish, and in that
I
initially,
mean, yes. I
hold
mean, if you kind of think about it, you've got this family, highly successful, both parents, beautiful big house, potentially in like a city. Like so when you break it down logistically, yeah,
on,
there are
hold
a
on,
lot
let
of
me
things.
get all the way through my thought.
I'm sorry, but
Damn.
I'm agreeing with you.
Okay, but like, damn.
I'm
Can't even
sorry.
get to the period in the sentence.
All right, I'll let you get to the period. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So the conversation not necessarily was around the setup of both parents being home, both parents working, and having well paying jobs and in an affluent neighborhood, but really the comments about it being palatable for white consumption, frankly, and not necessarily representative of Black America, came around that it initially, in the first season, very much tiptoed around certain areas. You had the introduction of the grandparents, which I think are played amazingly, by the way, but that was done in a very comical way, which
Right.
should be. It is a sitcom, okay, and it is on ABC.
You're
But
actually going to bring up a good point that I actually had written in notes. So I'm really glad
but
you hit
but
that.
very much, first season, because this is where conversation started, where we got the introduction to the show
Introduction
and
to
the
it.
characters, very much, lightly touched on being Black in America in a, I think, fair to say, first season, very soft, stereotypical way, even with the setup the way it was.
I agree.
Okay. And I think that that's a fair comment to say. I would say that, for me, my experience with the series was very different than yours. I jumped in immediately. One, because I have a lot of respect and also at the same time, a lot of curiosity around Kenya Barris because
Me
I feel like
too.
I never know exactly what I'm going to get from Kenya. It's either going to be like super blackety black
Black
or
AF or blackish.
right, right? Like Blackish season 1 or Black AF on Netflix. Like that's where the pendulum swings, and I
It
never
so does
know
because I've watched both.
where exactly you're gonna fall in the swing with Kenya until like you really start getting deep down into it. And I feel like Blackish is, one of those series where it did take some time, one, for the writing room to really understand the actors that they had and how they can write for them wrapped
Uh-huh.
around the issues that they want to, and then also proving success enough that they could go to places that they wanted to go. I don't think that you can come out swinging season 1. It's
No,
not
especially
ABC is
not on
not.
ABC.
Yeah, ABC is not Netflix. You can't come out
You can't
swinging.
be doing that, and that's why Black AF is on Netflix. You will
Right,
never see Blackish on. I mean, you'll never see Black AF not on that type of on that type of platform. I
right.
think it's far too in your face. It's far too nope. This is how it is. How
Hmm.
do you, and there's and you however you feel about it is how you're going to feel about it. But we're not shifting this for you.
Right,
Here's the food. Eat the food. Finish the plate.
right.
Moving on.
Finish your plate.
Finish
And
the plate.
if you don't, I mean,
I
then
mean,
there's going to be
then
bad.
you go to bed hungry. But this is
Right.
what it is. But you made a really great point. So I
Hmm.
kind of want to segue because you mentioned that Blackish is a sitcom and
Hmm.
that the introduction of the grandparents in the first season was very much comical. And I was doing some research a little earlier, and I was like looking through the timeline of
Hmm.
sitcoms that we have had with ensemble people of color casts. And
Hmm.
one of the first like identifiers for the majority of them are comedies. And when you look back at some of them, like Sanford and Sons, Good
Hmm.
Times,
Hmm.
227,
Hmm.
there's this, and the angry part of me wants to be like, it's kind of really minstrelly,
Hmm.
kind of tiptoeing in vaudeville you
Hmm.
know, eras of comedy where, oh, look at these black people. They don't know how to run a business. They don't know how to manage an apartment building. They don't understand stuff. Look at how silly they are. Ha 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 ha.
Well, I think
And
that that's an interesting thing to raise, right? Because you mentioned some very specific shows there that I think one, for as successful as every single show there
one of
that you
those
mentioned was,
was, yep.
it was more successful and more well known, I feel, in black and brown communities than necessarily mainstream, right? Like even 227, which was on NBC, um, it was a lead into what their Power Hour was, which ended up in like the early to mid 90s being Sisters and Golden Girls, two shows about four white women,
It's
right? But at different stages
really
of their
weird
life.
that a show called Sisters was just, I mean, don't get me wrong, there can be
It was a
four
good
ways.
show. It was a good show. I enjoyed that show. I enjoed that show.
But
It
I
was a
mean,
good
I
show.
just going through the whole list, like
But it
one, I
was
just
sisters,
don't
not
want.
sisters.
I'd love to see
We'll
them
get
respin that and
we'll
add
get
an age
there.
on that and spin that. That'd be a
We'll
great
get there.
changing the narrative. But I
Yeah.
digress.
But
But
227 still was a lead in for that.
okay,
And was like NBC's acceptable black
right.
cast mainstream show.
I just found it really funny because looking at this whole list, like if you look from like 1972 up until right until I think the crest of 2010, the majority of ensemble people of color casted sitcoms, the first thing on that billet is comedy.
Mhm.
And I remember from the few bits of some of these shows that I do remember watching, like I remember watching a couple of episodes of A Different World. I think though I was a little young there and didn't really
Yeah, you
understand
were
exactly what that was about,
definitely, yeah.
but I remember that. And now looking back at that, I'm like, holy crap, being a 36-year-old woman now, I'm like, I kind of want to go back and rewatch that just to
I
see if
highly recommend that you do.
so I could reabsorb that from a different perspective because before I was just like, yes, young black, kids in an all black college. And then I kind of want to put the stop sign on that. I'm like, oh my God, historically black college, which is something, growing up, I didn't think about until well after the fact.
I'll
About
be honest with you. A different world is the reason why I learned about HBCUs. I didn't know that they existed.
so I
Didn't know
mean
that they existed.
I mean
Like,
I think I didn't really think about them until I watched The Great Debaters, the
that's a good one.
movie.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then when it finally did happen, I'm like, oh, and of course me being kind of naive and little at this point, like I was like, oh, I'm like, there are colleges for black people, so like I can go to those colleges. Well, I mean, also they're very prestigious, and I didn't have the grades for that, but
Well,
Um,
but for me, if I think about, or I should say, when I think about, representation in TV shows, particularly broadcast media, right? When I think of shows that featured as the main protagonist, not necessarily ensemble, because with ensemble comedy, there's kind of, I think, really up until the last 15 years, kind of the tried and true, this is the formula, so fit your thing into the formula and you can get on prime time. And I
yep.
don't necessarily want to
Are
ding
we
a
talking like
show.
Martin in Living Color? Are
Yeah,
we
we're gonna
talking?
get there. We're gonna get there. But
Okay.
I do feel that, like, there was, for much of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and really early 2000s, kind of the set, this is what works for ensemble. So make your thing fit this and you can get on network. And
Okay.
so you have to play within that framework. So I don't necessarily want to ding or think that it's fair to ding ensemble for trying to
No,
just
no, no.
fit
And I'm not
the, the blanket.
and I'm not dinging it. I'm just making the observation from the outside now that I definitely did not
It's a
make
good
then.
observation and it's valid. I just want to say that ensemble sit comedy does have, and has had for a long time, kind of these are the ways that you have to play in order to actually be successful, to make it so that you can go into syndication, which is really where we make money and all we want to do. So hit these markers so we can hit syndication, and then after that we don't give a shit because we've hit syndication. So if you blow up or go off the deep end, then fine, that's cool, we're going to make our money and everybody's straight. But that's one bucket of things. I think of, representation in TV, and first I start off with kind of like chronologically what I'm aware of and some of the things that I remember as a kid hearing our parents talk about, or the stuff that I actually ended up watching. I am a child of the 80s. So I was born at the end of the 70s. And so there were so many things that were coming out of, so many shows that were coming out of the 70s that were running in syndication by the time that I was, in elementary school, that they were like the afternoon block of TV shows. So there was just a whole lot of, things that I got exposed to. So when I would come home from school after I do my homework, which didn't take me a lot of time, I would end up watching things like I can tell you my run was Sanford and Sons, went into Welcome Back Cotter, went into Mork and Mindy, then it went into Good Times, then there was the news break, and then after the news break, depending upon what channels, like mom would allow the other TVs in the house that weren't running her soap operas to be on,
The one in the kitchen, particularly.
I either got to watch reruns of Soap, Maud, um, Quincy MD, um, I Dream of Jeannie, and Bewitched. And then there was All in the Family, and those were kind of the things that made up like the afternoon to like early evening before bedtime block of TV shows. And then there were
Hmm.
the prime time things that we made
Kind
destination
of,
television, like
yeah.
Cosby Show, destination television. So when I start to put together the timeline, for me, it kind of starts with Sanford and Sons, because that's really like the first show that I remember seeing so many black people on, that was interesting to me because it was witty.
Okay.
Like, it was one of the first comedies that I remembered like one liners from, and some of the situations that were set up in it like stuck with me. Like, I wasn't used to, if you're not familiar with the show, the setup is basically that there's this father and son. So it was unique to me in that it presented this family unit where it was a single dad, it was a single black dad. So
What?
yeah, Sanford raised his son Lamont. His wife Elizabeth had passed, um, and so he had this junking business, but was always trying to like pull off these schemes and things, um, get rich quick schemes because he didn't want to really be in the business or like do any of the work. And it was a really interesting dynamic for me because like in our lives, in our family lives, and everything that I had seen around us, like the mom and the dad worked equally as hard. And so therefore the kids were expected to work as hard and produce stuff. And so here was this TV show with this grown ass man, Fred Sanford, being played by the amazing comedian Red Fox, by the way, and his son Lamont. And the Red Fox character is basically like trying to be this lackadaisical, lazy, let me just get rich and I can be done with all this stuff and lays about my days character. And his son was the hardworking, enterprising, like the reason why the business worked situation. And I had never seen a
That
situation like
dynamic. Right.
that at
What we
all.
grew up with. Right.
And so the way that things were written and just, the back and forths that they would have, like those were just so surprising to me because I didn't know that like that was a dynamic that could exist.
Right.
Period. Like adults can be lazy. What?
I know, right? Like
Huh? How does
surprise.
that happen? And even with that, like just their back and forth, like I'd never seen, even in a grown ass way, an adult call their parent an old fool.
Oh yeah, because God, no, there was no talking
No,
back to our parent.
and Fred would always refer to Ron as a big dummy. But even through all those things, like they were super close and they kept the business going and they kept together, even though Lamont like wanted to desperately like not be
Right.
working with his dad or living at home. He knew his dad needed him because that was their unit. That's what they had. That was their world. And that all got conveyed to me through this sitcom, whereas so many other people just saw it on the surface as, oh, this lazy dad and his son that's trying to pull him up and they don't really get along. And I'm like, no, you're
Oh
missing the
no,
point.
they get along so well,
But
but
what
you
I
don't
loved,
understand that.
right, but what I loved about that was it was such a interesting way to look at black families because at the time my only experience was our black family because
Right.
we grew up in a ridiculously, at the time, not black neighborhood.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
Yep.
so that was so interesting and quizzical to me. So I used to like pull it apart all the time. And that's, yeah, seriously, Soap and Quincy, great shows. Great shows. Seriously. Soap, to this I still say, was a sitcom well ahead of its time. But when you look at, for me, Sanford and Son, it was also the first time that, like, again, predominantly the entire show was black people. And I hadn't seen that in most of the stuff that I watched. As I started running through like what my blocks were, like there were the token other characters on other
Yep.
shows, you know, Benson on Benson and uh what's his face on Silver Spoon.
I don't know.
Yeah, so this is the character that Alfonso Ribeiro. So before Alfonso Ribeiro was Carlton, there
Okay.
was
I was about to say because I'm like, I know him.
there's seriously, like, if you've date myself, but I don't care. So there was basically a sitcom that was like Richie Rich, but like live action. So it was called Silver Spoon, and it was basically about this rich kid and his dad. Like he had like slides in his house and a
Okay.
train that like he was able to ride from like his room down to the study into the
Because I
main
mean,
floor or
if
whatever.
anything spells luxury, it's here's your own train in your house.
And Alfonso Ribeiro, I can't remember the name of his character, but the main character was Rick, and Alfonso Ribeiro was Rick's best friend, who
Okay.
was black. So
Black.
you had that token
Yep.
thing. But I mean, when you start running through the line, I guess for me, as I started doing my research to have our conversation today, it was really surprising to me as I started looking at like my timeline, and basically I looked at what I probably could have listened to as a child through what I actually watched through my childhood and young adulthood and into my adulthood. And then I just started like looking at, okay, I can actually like say like this is the thing that laid the foundation and the groundwork for this. And then I started looking at, okay, like what were the shows around that? So, like I said, I
Okay.
was born in the late 70s. I was born in 1979. And so Sanford and Sons ran in the 70s from like 72, I think, to like 77. And so that's why it was like quickly in
Yeah, you're right.
syndication.
72 to 77. I have my notes right here. Good
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
Yeah, ran that
yeah.
long.
Sometimes I can remember my homework. Um, but before that, the one that I remember mom talking about a lot, and it wasn't really until I was like in my college age time that I actually sought it out, was a series named Julia, because I think it's important to remember that, you know, seeing yourself reflected in mainstream media, whether that's TV in prime time or in movies, it can have really lasting and profound effects on how, as an individual, you may feel you should be seen
Mhm.
in society. Not saying that's fair, not saying that's right, but I challenge anyone to be honest about any conversations that they have with their friends where you're just like, I felt like at this point in my life I would be here. And if you really start digging down into it, it's because they'll always mention either, because I thought my life was going to be more like this movie or this TV show or this character. You do start to carry some of those things, and they do start to inform kind of your definition of success, accomplishment, and how you rate yourself up against certain life milestones. Or, everybody just wants to be popular in high school, not necessarily because we understand popularity, but because,
That's what
frankly,
everybody else is striving to do, so I should be doing that.
right. And that happens because we end up watching all these TV shows or reading books that tell us that, like, this is what makes your high school life better. If you can sit at the popular kids table and not the shy kids table, if you can do the sports and be the jock, because the jock gets the girl, right? Because that's what
Right.
books and movies and TVs tell us,
Yep.
which we know that to be full
Chris, I
on
feel
bull.
like you've been sneaking into my therapy sessions because I literally talk about this every week.
You're not the only one who's been to therapy.
I know.
So,
So therapy, it's nice. Um, but
therapy,
no, it's
everybody should
very, it's
go.
very, it's very poignant that you bring that up because I do in fact bring that up. I'm like, back, I used to think, I'm like, oh man, I'm like, I can't wait to go to high school and have like 3 or 4 boyfriends and then go to prom and meet the love of my life and get married to him right out of high school. And like, that's clearly not what happened here. And that's okay. I am totally okay with that not being my situation now. But if you had asked 21-year-old Amanda, if she thought she was successful, she would have told you no, because I did not hit any of those. And if you actually kind of look at, and I mean, I'm gonna step back for a moment because obviously we were not born around the same time. So the TV that I digested during this very strong developmental part of my life, because I'm 84, so I'm like kind of mid 80s, mostly 90s, here. So my lineup was effectively, I'd always see a little bit of the Cosby Show, then I would see Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Family Matters, Sister Sister. Oh God, there was Step by Step on, I think, ABC on Friday. Dinosaurs was in there, but like,
Yours.
but that was kind of this. And Moesha. Moesha was very big when I was coming up.
Mhm.
And Brandy was a national
That's
treasure.
definitely Fresh Prince.
And yeah. So and I mean, I think even with those shows, if you kind of look at them, if you break them down, you have a, above middle class family. Like the sets were always very nice. So these were not super, these weren't families that were completely struggling. Like they had kind of found their groove, and then you just saw their day-to-day problem of the week,
Mm-hmm.
storyline with like not always a clean solution at the end of the episode, but like eventually it would get paid off. So like there was, it always ended on an uptick, or
Mm-hmm.
it always ended neatly enough, which I was like, oh, so everything always works out. This is great. And that's not what life is. Life does not always work out. You don't always get the slam dunk, Mr. Cooper. Like
So
sometimes the ball hits you in the face. Okay? Like
it
a
does, it
lot.
does, and you go, ah, my
And
nose, Marsha. Anyway,
exactly.
no,
So
I think that's interesting though, because I just want to jump back to the timeline thing, because I think that there are the shows that came before the block that you just talked about had, I think, more instances where they had issues that popped up that didn't necessarily always end cleanly in one episode or even two episodes. And that was something that was very much innovative and trailblazing, but I think also scary. And that's why you have this big schism of when that
they're
disappeared.
like, oh
And
no, we can't go there. Let's lighten it up a little bit.
agreed, agreed. So as you mentioned before, and I'm so glad that you touched on it, because it was one of the ones I really wanted to talk about. One of the series that I just, I don't want to say lived, because it wasn't my experience, but like I lived for, was Good
Okay.
Times.
Okay.
Okay. And so I remember watching Good Times in rerun, because Good Times actually wasn't very successful in its initial run. Like it was constantly up for being canceled, because it wasn't really building a big audience. And really, it found its audience and its place in pop culture after it went into syndication. And I remember watching it as a kid all the way through. And I felt like Good Times, once you got past the JJ Dynamite thing, which we'll talk about
Dynamite.
catchphrase and that
Dynamite.
trope,
Mm-hmm.
but once you got past that, really what Good Times focused on, and I thought was like a huge damn issue that I had not ever seen a TV show address that I could recall at the time that I was watching this. And I was probably about 9 or 10 the first time that I watched Good Times all the way through. Um, they're basically, if you've never watched the show, it was about this family that lived in basically the projects.
Okay.
Black family. Um, both parents were working. Um, and they had their kids, coming in and out. JJ stayed in the apartment with his parents. Um, but, it was all about their relationships with each other and people in the building, the actual, neighborhood round the way folks.
Okay,
And at
got it.
one point in the series, one of the neighbors, who you didn't really see all the time, but you saw her daughter's was Penny, used to come over all the time, because she would, hang out with JJ and some of the other kids, and, often come to basically get guidance and get care from um, James, the husband, and his wife, and in the apartment. And I didn't understand why, like, this young girl was constantly like in the apartment, because all of the family members were older than she was. And as you got deeper into a few episodes, you started to realize that her mom was physically abusing her, was beating her, wasn't feeding her all the time. And it was finally starting to be discovered by another woman in the building, and their older daughter, that Penny was really truly being mistreated. And I'd never seen that before. We talk about it in our community, and we make jokes about catching whoopings here and there, but actually being physically abused by a parent and then learning that it's because that parent is going through a substance abuse thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's deep and
It
that's
is.
real. And it wasn't presented in a joke way, even though this was a sitcom. It was real. And like you had basically another woman in the building was just like, you know what, you're just gonna come stay with me. So you're just gonna come to my apartment and basically become her mom and then fight her birth mom for custody of Penny. Like that shit hit deep
Hard.
and
I
hard
can
and
feel
like
it. I can feel it.
and it was
And I didn't watch
presented.
this, so I don't have any points of
Yeah,
reference on this,
so
unfortunately.
I'm sure it's on the YouTubes because all things that shouldn't be on YouTube are. But
Are.
I mean, you can get the box set. I believe it's on disc. I don't know that Good Times is available on digital yet, but
Okay.
I highly recommend it because it was, once you take the abstract of the characterization thing that happens, and this happens a lot with many sitcoms, it's not just black sitcoms. So I want to be very fair in saying that
I'm
because
very
it
glad that
happened
you
with,
brought that up because I actually had a note about over exaggeration and characterization of ensemble casts. So I'm kind
and
of glad
and
that you
and
touched on that
and
nugget.
and it's kind of, again, it's one of those like stamps of, hey, this is what you have to have in order
In
to
order to hit
want to
network.
move on.
Yeah.
Okay, it happens with Seinfeld. That's what happened with the entire character of Kramer,
Yep. You're right.
right? It happens with Cheers. Norm is a one note joke.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yep.
doesn't really get to be much more than just, hey, Norm, and where he's at the bar. Like,
That's
that's
it. That's
That's
it.
it. That's what he gets to be, right? It happens with Perfect Strangers, okay, with Balky,
Yep. You're
right?
absolutely
Like
right.
it
Ding
happened,
ding ding.
it happened with Family Matters. It happened with Full House. Like it again.
Right.
And one of the things that I want to be real careful, mindful of being aware of it and that it happened, but also it was like the thing, one of the things that was this stamp of, okay, this means that you'll have longevity. Who is your JJ Dynamite?
Right.
Like, and that happened. It happened with Different Strokes, like what you're talking about, Willis. Like you become this one note characterization thing because that's the soundbite that people can remember
Mm-hmm.
or will
It's kind
remember.
of it's kind of type it's kind of a typecasting.
It
You
is.
know.
It very much is. This is now going to become the brand identity for
Yep.
this thing to have longevity. And it's not fair, but it is what, happened for many of those shows. Hey, Mr. Catty, like that every single sitcom, that I can
Had
run
a
down the
thing.
list of had that thing that
Yep.
became, the thing to hang your hat on and be this is going to be the memorable thing for our series and why it's going to carry through, and not necessarily was a good thing or a bad thing. In the case
Yep.
of Good Times, it was a devastating thing for Jimmy Walker because it ended his career. You couldn't be anybody else other than JJ Dynamite. That was it. Okay, and it was a throwaway thing that he did one time, but because he nailed it that one time, everybody's like, you gotta do that thing. And then the writers were like, oh, we have to do this thing because like everybody loved it because
And
that's
he's
such a
got to say it like at least one time in every episode.
yep. And so then that's the hat,
Yep.
that's your brand. Thank you very much. Collect
I
your
think
check.
I think in my block of shows, I think the big one for me that I remember is from Martin. Damn, Gina! And like poor Tisha Campbell, I think after that, no one ever saw her as anyone but Gina for a
It was,
while.
look, I'll be fair. It was really hard to see her as anybody as Gina because for me, I think like the Martin era is where you start to pivot
Yep.
and
But
and
only slightly.
just slightly.
Just
But like
slightly.
I was looking at the timeline and I was like, okay, so you go from Julia, which is like just before my time, but it was the one that mom talked about like all the time. And so I had to go back and look at it. Julia is where I fell in love with Diane Carroll, Queen, praise be her name. Um, but Julia was unique in that It came out in like, I want to say late 60s and ran, I think it was like 68 to 71 or like 67 to 71. It was
So
a
it
short.
was on before
It
Sanford
was,
and
it
Sons,
was
like right
before Sanford
before.
and Son. And there had been a lot of shows before Julia that, had a black or brown cast member, but typically those are people in positions of service, right?
Huh. Hmm.
Anyway, times being what they
Hmm.
are, whatever. But what was unique about Julia is that Diane Carroll was the lead in this primetime show. She was a widower, a nurse working in a doctor's office with her son, Corey. Um, and I only, like, in my college age, because that's when I actually had the internet available to me, and was able to actually go to the library at my school and look up episodes of the show, was finally able to see it. And like, you want to talk about before its time and a crazy depiction of a smart, affluent, suburban black person on television playing completely against the trope. It was stunning to me to think of, okay, from 68 to 71, you have that. Then, really kind of your big one is then Sanford and Son. And then, like, after Sanford and Son, you move basically to the Cosby
Must
Show.
show. Yep.
Because that, I think, probably out of most of the series we're going to talk about, was the longest running. And I'm talking main Cosby Show, not the little spin-off Cosby Show that they did
I think
before.
the timeline. I think I have it as 1984 to 92.
Yeah, that sounds about right. 84 to 92. Because then there was like this slight spin-off that they did, and then the full like different world spin-off, so that there was like a Cosby Light thing.
Right.
But you then go into the realm of Cosby Show 227, and then you kind of have this revitalization of the ensemble sitcom, frankly, because you start to have, networks like, I think at the time it was UPN, but it's basically Warner, and BET pop up, and then you have the expansion of cable, so there's more programming that is needed. But then you have this plethora of new shows pop up, like Living Singles, Girlfriends, Different
Yep.
World. And for
Yep.
me, like, if I look at the timeline, really it was that Living Singles, Girlfriend, to me, Living Singles, Girlfriend, Different World, Martin, where you start tipping away from the traditional sitcom. Oh, we're going to focus on what's relatable for the person at home watching this. Of, I'm having
Right.
trouble at school, maybe I have a bully issue, kind of the issues programming, and then like the situational, oh, I got to figure out how I'm going to pay this bill and not that bill, and really start getting into, issues television, right?
Yeah.
Like, in
Yep.
each of those series, I can tell you at least one issues episode that sits out to me that was really done well, right? Like in Different World, I can tell you that it's when Dwayne Wayne goes to the football game and comes out and finds that some members from the school that they just trounced, which happened to be predominantly white,
Mm-hmm.
spray painted the N bomb on his car, and then they all get busted by the campus police and get put in a cell together, and they go through it in a real way. If you've never seen this clip from A Different World, if you
I think I've heard people talk about this episode, but I don't think I've ever
oh, I
watched
can pick
it.
them up. The Tupac episode, where like he's getting in it, and not dude. All right, anyway, getting off the
I
track.
have homework outside of this show, is what
Yeah,
I'm hearing.
right. Yeah, you got homework outside the show. But like, that is absolutely a issues episode. Okay. I mean, if I want to focus on, what did I say? A Different World, Girlfriends, the
Friends.
one where uh oh uh what's her name? I can't remember the character that she
But
played, but
if you tell me the situation, because I watched Girlfriends, but I'm blanking on names too. But
okay. But when like they were going on the trip together, the excursion together, all the women together, and then they get pulled over,
yep, yep.
right? So like I can go through that episode. You want to go through Living Single? Oh shit! I
Well, I
mean,
mean, the one for Living Single that I remember is when Maxine is up for a promotion at work, and it's between her and I think it's a white guy.
yep.
But like
And
they are
like
like
all these
match for
cases that
match.
she's won, and all these other things, and they just hand it to him.
Handed to
Like
him.
and but what was real about all of those wasn't that those situations happened, but it's with how the shows actually dealt with them in a smart way, in what I felt was at the time a real way for them to spark conversation, as opposed to, again, like you talked about when we started this, tidying things up in a nice little bow in 20 minutes.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
feel like that was really the era where we started to shift away from it. And then you look at series like we have now, to your point of a Blackish. Like you don't have Blackish, and you don't have Blackish be able to do the episodes that they're doing now versus what they were doing first season if you didn't have Fresh Prince and the episode where Ben Vereen is the deadbeat dad and makes Will actually fucking cry for real. Like that episode still to
Yeah.
this day fucks with
Gutter
me.
roll.
Right? Guttural.
Gutter roll.
We can understand it. I thought that was an amazing representation of actually how some shit goes down within Black families. And I felt like, that was a moment. And even with the Aunt Viv switch, which we can do a whole episode on that, and we just might at some point, because original Aunt Viv for
I just
life.
don't know why we had to go Viv Light. Like why? Why?
Because
like I'm not mad at her, but like why though?
Janet speaks her mind, and that really wasn't working for everybody in the cast and the crew. And you do need to be a team player when you're doing ensemble. And if you can't be a team player, you might get voted
replaced.
out by the team.
Right. You're right. When it's a team effort, everybody's opinion matters.
Janet, amazing. But
I'm not discrediting her. I'm not discrediting her.
Okay, and she got a lot of beef with a lot of peeps. And they got a lot of beef with her. I gotta respect the beef. Okay, but when you're the common denominator in things,
sometimes you gotta think about that. Is the problem them or is the problem you?
Sometimes they might just throw that fraction out.
Very true.
And say, let's start the equation over again. Is it right?
No.
Not really. Is it
no,
what happened?
I think a meeting of the minds needs to happen there so that they can find where the trigger is. Because there's clearly a trigger in all situations like that, right?
Well, the trigger was found and the trigger was removed. Like that's where we ended up with.
They did
right?
it.
But I do think that because I was thinking about it, as we were talking about this, I started thinking about, what are the series right now that I'm looking at that I feel really do not necessarily push the envelope, but that I do feel are better representations in media now for Black and brown people than what initially I had as a kid and got to grow up through. Right?
Me.
Go ahead. I'll pick you. The chair recognizes Manda.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, first of all, I feel like I kind of need to acknowledge Boondocks, because I mean, in an animation front,
comic form or animated form.
I mean both, but I mean my first absorption of this was the animation, and then I went back and looked at the comic.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that, like, in terms of pushing envelopes, in terms of animation, representation in animation, Boondocks was really like oh snap. And then on top of that, they were dropping truth like, here you go, here's your doggy bag, here's your doggy bag, here's your doggy bag.
But I mean, that it's because Magruder didn't pull those punches in his comic strips.
Right. And so you already knew what you were getting into. But I'm just saying, like, that kind of punched through the animation wall, at least for me, was that. So like that's where my crumbling begins, is there. So I mean, you've got Blackish now.
Crumble, but
it is. I'm a little late to the game, but better late than never.
I mean, there is
but there
a
you go.
6 year difference between us, so that's fair.
But so like we've got Blackish now. I'm not really
Mhm,
talking first season. I'm talking later
mhm.
stuff.
Yep.
We've got Insecure, which I
Mhm.
mean kind of came out of Issa Rae's Diary of an Awkward Black Woman,
Didn't
which
kinda, directly came
did
from that.
directly came
Mhm.
from, which if you never watched that, if you watch that and you watch Insecure, you'll definitely see the parallels
You're like,
there.
"Oh, Insecure is basically the adventures of an awkward black girl, but with budget
But with and better, yeah, with budget.
and a full
Um,
writing team."
and then you've got Atlanta, and then you've
Mhm,
got Power, which
mhm.
it took me a while because everyone was talking about Power, and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'm ready. And then one day I'm like, I'm gonna sip this Kool-Aid, and then I drank like 8 gallons of it. So,
Mhm. 'Cause it's
so
that
like,
good red shit.
but like I mean, going back from what we had to what we have now, I think you're seeing
Mhm,
this big definitive line between, the use of comedy in a lot of our stuff, and now you're starting to see this shift into more drama focus. Where I mean, comedy is still very much in there, but I
mhm.
think the vision, the gaze, is now very much trying to move away from
Well,
comedy
because
and
I
is
think
trying to put emphasis on the story, on the drama. I mean,
well, I think
we have Star Trek Discovery right now with the lead is a black female, and at first I wasn't sure I was about Michael. Like it took me a minute, but I was so happy to see her,
it
and
should
I
take
know
everybody a minute to like Michael as a character, but not
as a
because she's
character.
black.
Right?
Right.
No, it was her character, but I was just like,
Yeah. It takes a
ooh,
hot second to like Michael,
and
and
then I was
then,
like,
like,
all
you get about,
right,
like, 4
okay,
episodes in, and you're like, "Oh, I'm fucking
okay,
about
right,
this."
and I was, and I am.
Mhm.
So I was like, yes, finally, and I'm just saying, like, we're starting to see
And
these
also Michelle
breakdowns.
Yao. Can we just take a hot second
Hell
and just
yeah,
snaps for Michelle Yao? Can we just do that? Because she's a
yes.
badass.
So like, but I'm but but we're seeing that now, and you
Mhm,
don't tend to see minorities in fantasy in a
mhm.
front row, in a
In a
front
protagonist
POV.
role,
So
yes.
it's like, here you go. And I mean, I just started watching Lower Decks, which is an animated version of a Star Trek universe, and
Mhm.
we've got a female protagonist in that, and I think she was also in Space Force, which I don't know if you've ever watched that or not, but she's
I
great in
haven't
that
watched that.
also.
I'm
It's
sure it's
actually
on my
really
queue on Netflix because
it's
I love
actually
Steve
really good. You
Carell,
got to get through the
but
first 2 episodes, but at first I wasn't sure. I like very similar to Discovery. I wasn't
mhm,
sure I was gonna like Mariner from
mhm,
Lower Decks, but now I every week I wait for that episode because it's just that like it's just so good, and I so
mhm,
appreciate that. But and then you had I think in 2016 we had Queen Sugar, which at first I was not sure how I was going to feel about that because I felt like that was finally a story where it's like, hey, here are these 3 siblings who now
mhm,
inherited this sugar cane,
mhm,
effectively a plantation from their father. And here's
mhm,
how these 3 are going to approach all of that symbolism and then and then build the system to work for them, whether or not it will or it won't, and the
mhm.
struggles within that dynamic. So at first I was like, not sure I'm going to jump into that. And then,
No, I
and I'm
don't know that
pleasantly,
I've watched that. Is that the one that Meryl Dandridge is on?
I don't know who that
And
is.
Rutina Weasley, who was on,
Yes, yes.
okay.
That
Because
name I
Meryl,
recognize.
you remember that Meryl Dandridge, okay, so you probably are, yeah, so Meryl's on that as well. She's the absolutely, like, stunning, like, model-looking Black woman.
Oh, okay.
Meryl Dandridge
Oh,
is the voice of, what's her face from Last of Us, who you shoot at the end of the game so that you can keep
oh. Yes, yes,
killing
yes, yes,
bitches.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
so, so you got that. So you had
mhm,
that, and then I mean, in terms of like drama, when you start kind of seeing, uh, POCs as protagonists in like highly sought positions. So you've got How to Get Away with Murder. You've got
mhm.
Luther.
Viola,
You've got
what did
Scandal.
you just say? Oh, Carrie.
Yeah. So like, before like yes, like in the 90s like, I think a lot of the adults in these sitcoms I watched like they had jobs like as a basketball coach. And like but you never, so like now
Oh,
we're seeing this
don't shit on Hanging with Mr.
I'm not
Cooper.
I liked hanging with Mr. Cooper. I just keep going
I
back to
liked
that.
hanging
That's
with
like one of,
Mr.
but I'm just
Cooper.
saying that like they never had, they were always okay. They were always like middle class, stable, which is great. But like
Mhm.
they never played with the dynamic of no, what a completely top brow, successful minority protagonist looked like. And now I'm starting to see that now in
Well,
our media.
and I think it's just because, the pendulum has started to switch,
Sway.
right?
Yeah.
And part of that is because, frankly, the idea of their ice being colder just went, not necessarily away, but it just started to melt, right? Because you started to have show after show after show that kept pushing the envelope a little bit more than the show before it and still proved to be successful, right?
Yeah.
And that's what then allowed almost the comfort level of, okay, well, you can be a little more edgy, you can be a little more real. Okay, we don't have
We'll
to
give
make,
you this episode to bring this up. Let's see how this trends.
right.
We'll
Well,
discuss
and not
more
even
after
just
that.
that, but like, okay, you got to remember, like, all these shows were pitched multiple times to multiple networks, and so many of them passed on it because when networks are picking up shows, they want to pick up shows that are going to build audience because,
Right.
and ultimately, the show is a vehicle for advertising,
True.
right? Like the networks don't pick up shows because they want to make stars out of the people that are acting these roles. They pick up shows because they believe it's going to get people to tune into their channel and be hooked on that channel so they can be fed up advertising so that said network can make money. And then, hey, if on the back end they can earn some awards at the end of it, great,
Accolades just turn into possibly more money.
because
So
that turns into more money, right?
it
That's
all got to turn into money. And then
okay.
I think the last one I kind of want to talk a little bit about, um,
Mhm.
is we started seeing, the emergence of like black fantasies, so superheroes in a real
Mhm.
way, like Luke Cage.
Mhm.
Primarily, Black
Mhm.
Panther came I think right on the tail end of that, like in the weird, and
Well, Black
now
Panther
I
happened.
think it
So
was, I think
the
they're
movie
close.
character. So
Yeah,
Panther in the
I'm
Avengers.
talking movie, not comic,
Yeah, yeah.
because comic was
So
way before.
yeah, yeah. So the Black Panther character, I believe, appeared in the Avengers movies before the Luke Cage TV series had its deal.
Okay,
I
thanks for the
believe my
clarification on
timeline
that.
could be a little bit off because you got to remember because Black Panther appeared in, what was it, Civil War? Or
I
one
don't.
before
It's been
that.
so long. I'm so separated from them.
It's been
But I'm
a
just
lot of
saying that,
movies.
like, in
Mhm,
terms of the roles that we're now seeing, like I'm starting to
mhm.
see these thin
Well,
veins
he had,
where they're
Power, the Jamie Foxx one with the
Project Power, which I just
Project Power.
watched,
Yeah, I haven't watched it
which
yet. It's in the queue.
there's a web, I think it's a like I'm not trailer, like a pilot that a friend of mine did called Pushing Skills, that actually,
Mhm,
like, there's this weird parallel between what this friend of mine did for a film he wanted to do and what
mhm,
Project Power does. And I
mhm,
mean, I don't hate what Project Power is doing.
mhm.
I worry though, because I get certain vibes from Project Power in the way that I kind of got them for Bright. And I
Okay.
don't know if you watched. I feel like they
Mhm.
built this really great world, but because they made this a movie, they had to throw all this stuff in. And I mean, and it makes cohesion, it makes sense. It makes strong enough sense. However, I feel like they should have made this a series so they could have properly fleshed it all out. But Jamie Foxx, I think, does a really great job.
Okay.
Love me some JGL. Give me more JGL all the
Mm,
time, please and thank you.
okay.
And and the girl who plays Robin in Project Power, oh my god. Like the fact that she's a 30-year-old woman who is acting as a 16-year-old, and you would not know because one, black don't crack. But
Mm,
she really harnessed that nugget. Like it's good. She grips you, man. She grips you in a way. So I would advocate for you to watch that if you haven't already. But the last piece I want to talk about is, you don't get a lot of black people in sci-fi, and you don't really get like tangible black folks in horror. Like, yeah, you got Cabin
I
Fever,
would
and yeah,
just
you
phrase
had
that a little bit differently. We don't get to see.
and I mean, and I think right now the big one that people are gravitating towards is Lovecraft Country, which I'm starting.
Mm.
I'm going to start watching it because one, I mean, I've read some Lovecraft, and I mean, most people have dabbled in it. I think a little bit, even if it's not your niche. But
Hmm.
the fact that I think Key Peel is involved in. I think he's one of the writers or the producers for it. So like, and he is like kind of come out as like this, producer of horror and like really big suspenseful think pieces. So I'm going to jump into that because man, like I'm kind of excited to see where this is going to go because finally we're going to see, you
It's
know,
definitely up your alley. I have a hard time with Lovecraft, not because of his writing, but because of just how massive of a racist and misogynist he was.
yeah, yes, he
So
is. Yes.
it, it's
Sometimes
hard,
it's hard to separate the artist from their art, and I
right?
understand, especially in
It
this
is hard.
instance.
There are some places where I can do it, and there are
And
some
some
places
places you
I
can't. We all have our limits.
okay, like on the
But
spectrum, like I can separate Bill Cosby from the Cosby Show because it was such a huge ensemble and gave birth to different world that it's so much bigger than just him.
him,
I
yeah. I
can't
agree.
separate him from Fat Albert,
Okay.
so like I can't go back there. Or like the electric company, I can't separate him from those, but I
Okay.
can't separate him from Cosby Show because when I think about the Cosby Show, the most and biggest moments that stand out for me are really moments that happen between Felicia Rashad and like I can't remember everyone's name, so I'm going to say their character names, but it was mostly the moments between, Felicia Rashad and like Vanessa, or with uh uh Lisa Bonet, or like it was always the mom and the daughter
Right,
moment.
but I think that's probably because those storylines probably resonated with you being a black
Right.
female
And
a
that's why
little
I
bit
can
more.
separate, and
It
that's why
connected a
like
little bit more.
I can separate Bill Cosby and all of his bullshit from the Cosby Show, because when I think about the Cosby Show, what I remember most are the women and their interactions and their stories, and not necessarily like for me. And I know that it was done this way for a reason, but Bill Cosby was always like almost like a supporting role to Felicia Rashad. Like
Well, I
it's
mean, it's like here's what's going on in the family, and then dad shows up and has like the big pearl nugget of wisdom that shifts the whole
that
thing.
but it just supports what Claire Huxtable did,
Right.
right? Like she
Yeah.
would like cuss Theo out, and then she would look at Bill and be like, "And what do you think?" Yes,
You'd be like
dear.
the same thing.
And then
With
like later
what
on in life, he would just double tap it of like, what your mom said was right in this day. So for me, it's Bill's not the lead for the Cosby Show for me, and so that's why I can like still revere the Cosby Show for what it is, because I wrap all of those things up in that. But that's kind of where, in all honesty, for me, the Cosby Show is really where I started feeling seen as a Black woman. Like, as much as I wanted
okay.
to be, Lisa Bonet's character, I knew I was Vanessa. But at some point in time, I wanted to grow up and be Sandra. Like, I wanted to have my shit together, and I wanted to be married, and I wanted to have my own place, and I, wanted to be able to be a strong, independent woman on my own and have my career, but also be able to come back to my family like whenever I needed to be grounded. I
Right.
didn't necessarily want a yes man as a husband, because I always thought that Elgin could be better, but like I understood that dynamic. And then when like a different world happened, again, as much as many people wanted to be the Lisa Bonet character, like our dad used to call me Miss Whitley. Like that was my nickname for the longest fucking time. And I'm like, first of all, I am not like Jasmine Guy. I was like, but I am bougie. You are correct.
So
So
you know what? Hey.
I'll accept that. I like that Whitley was smart. She didn't take any shit. She believed in what she believed. I wasn't that much of a Southern belle, but like I got it. And I got what he meant by
Meant by it.
for
Right.
me. But like that's really where I started feeling seen as a Black person in America, was when those two shows really hit, and they were both in mainstream. And I think to your point, when you mentioned that we seem to be shifting from comedy to drama, I thought that was a really interesting point because, frankly, you can't have, I don't think, drama without the levity, right? Like when you look at
Right. No, but I'm
the
just saying, like, it was far more heavily driven. Like, most of it was very much more comedy driven. And now we're seeing the scale kind of shift the other way. Comedy is still present, but it is
Mhm.
not the main focal that is bringing people
Right,
in. I think
right.
people are looking for something that they can connect to, and not everybody's life is funny.
Well,
Not
I think
everything is funny all the time.
I would take your point even further in that not necessarily that, what we're looking for is not always the light and the comedy, but there's now more acceptance because all of the things that have come before have
Hey,
proven that
right,
period end Black and brown stories are consumable and are desired and are profitable. And so,
agreed.
therefore, let's have more of that and more of them, and let's make them more diverse, and let's make them more interesting, complex, and they don't have to be the one liner dynamites. Like, there's a place for the I will destroy yous, and there's a place for the Lovecraft countries, and there's a place for the helps, and there's a place for the insecures, and
Right,
there's a place for the black AFs, and there's a place for the project plowers and the Luke Cages and the
right,
how to get away with murders. They all have a place and have an audience and can be profitable, but also reflections of just how actually diverse this community who has not seen themselves represented in these ways in a long time
right.
have been aching for it.
So there's
Because don't
one,
get me wrong, Stomp the Yard is great, but it's not everything.
I can't stomp. Well, I mean, I can, but not in the way that it is in Stomp the Yard. But so one last little nugget that I kind of want to bring up today. So I don't know if you've seen it or not yet, but there was a fan made revisioning of Fresh Prince of Bel Air called
I
just
knew
Bel
you were going
Air,
to talk about Bel Air. I knew
because
you
I
were
just
going
think
to talk
I
about Bel
just
Air.
think that I just think that like we're talking about this whole revisioning and this shifting, and of all the focal shows that came out during my development, I
Mm-hmm.
think that this is probably the best show to get this revisioning because of how impactful it was then. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I watched the revisioning, and I believe they're now in talks of making it a thing.
It's on time.
And
Done deal. It's being
a done
made.
deal. It's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think when I first came on board with it, people were like, "We don't know what Will Smith thinks about this," and he was just like, "No, I'm on board." I mean, he got his entanglement stuff he's
Producing it.
trying to deal with right now, so like
He's
he got bigger fish to
oh,
fry.
wait. He's not entangled.
Right? No, but
Okay.
his
And
circle.
also make sure you get all your things correct. So he's producing.
Okay, so he came on to produce because I didn't see that. I didn't see that when I was
Yeah.
looking through all my
So
notes and
the
stuff.
whole thing with the Bel Air thing is like after the fan made thing went out, at obviously Will was able to see it because of the internet. He ended up
Right.
meeting the guy who did it. They came together, absolutely loved it. He's like, we're gonna have to do something together. We're gonna have to do something. And everyone was like, you ain't gonna really do it. And then Will was like, fuck all y'all. I said we were gonna do it. We're actually doing it. So he's got his production company
Did
behind
did you did you see it? Did you see the? Because I thought it was
it.
powerful. I was
But
like, ooh,
it was really well done for what it was supposed to be. You and I have a little bit of a difference of opinion, not necessarily on Fresh Prince being a good thing to do a gritty remake. I'm just over gritty remakes. Don't I
I'm
for me
not. I
personally,
wouldn't even say gritty in this. I just think that
it's
they're
gritty.
they're they're
What
they're
they're doing
in,
is
they're
going to be
bringing
gritty
they're
with it.
bringing some realness to it that the sitcom that I got. Well, it was still there. I'm just saying I think they're cranking it up a notch. I'm not saying I don't
So
think it's gritty. I just think that they're cranking
I'm
up the
telling
realism.
I'm telling you, you should do some Google searches because it is literally being described as a gritty, edgy, and dark
Oh,
re envisioning of Fresh Prince. So I go down the line. It was a Vanity Fair piece that I read on it, and I was like,
All
oh,
right,
okay,
I'll go look up Vanity Fair because
yeah.
I
Make
don't
sure that
think
you have free articles to read.
I don't think that those words are, I don't know if those should be accurate.
No,
Because if you say gritty and you say dark, like some of the topics that was brought up in French Prince are hard. Like I think hard might be a nice identifier for this because they're gonna bring up some hard topics and real I hope really go there. But
like,
gritty, like I don't think
wait,
that's the right word. I hope that they
dude,
step back from that
dude,
direction because that's
dude.
not what it was.
So my husband was having this conversation about this because I brought it up, and I was like, well, um, and then he had forgot that I brought it up because he texted me about it when it got green light, and he was like, "So did you see this?"
Because
Um,
what's next? We're gonna get a gritty sister sister or a gritty
hold on,
Moesha.
hold on, hold on. And so he had had this conversation with one of his friends, and his friend was like, "I don't know, man. Like, have they ever like tried to take like a comedy and then switch it and make it like a dark drama thing? And has that ever been successful? And why would they think about doing it?" And my husband was like, "Yeah, no, they haven't done that." And I was like, "Time out. So you haven't watched Netflix because they did it with Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yep. They
They
tried it
did
with
it with
Riverdale, but they just went off the
tried it with
rails.
Riverdale. They
They tried
tried
it.
it with Charmed.
Yep. Oh, when they brought
Right?
in the Latina X
You know
revisioning.
what I mean? Like, absolutely. I was like, they've been trying to gritty reboot comedy sitcom things a bunch, and then we got
I
into
mean,
the
I
whole.
actually think they did. I think they did a great job with Sabrina. Actually,
I'm not saying that Sabrina wasn't good. The dark gritty reboot. What I'm saying is, I would prefer rather than taking an existing property that already ran and was successful, built a fandom, had existing characters, probably launched a bunch of careers for some people, or were the ends of careers for others,
with others. Yep.
rather than, oh, let me take that and existing stories and existing characters, and now let me just, like, on the other end of the entertainment spectrum where they were like focused on being funny before, now I'm going to focus them on being like dark and sad and tragic and drama, rather than doing that and then just regurgitating out these known characters and universes. I would prefer to see more things like a Raising Dion and a Lovecraft Country, new unique stories from new creators with new voices developing new worlds. I would rather see more of that.
Okay, more of
This is
that. Got
not
it.
shooting on Bel Air. The reboot I think is going to be great, and I think that it is going to be, I hope, more real and more of a representation of what the other side of that experience of being taken out of everything that you know and forced to go live with an aunt and an uncle for your safety, and that area that you're going into having its own grab bag of bullshit. I think that focusing on it that way as opposed to the like fun side for the most part, I get, and I think that that could be good, but I would much rather have just a new story.
Okay.
That was
No,
that.
that makes sense. 100% sense.
You know,
I'm down.
because I don't think that you need to trade on the nostalgia so much. Okay, Insecure's proven that to a point. Because I could make the argument that, yeah, like I said before, laughingly and jokingly, Insecure is just Adventures of a Black Girl with a couple more friends, a bigger budget, and
Yeah.
production value. But it's not really like new Issa's story. You know what I mean?
No. No.
As opposed to, other things that could come along, and but it lays the foundation for Issa building a production company and now being able to bring more of those stories forward and those kinds of things. So I do think that, having those things and having the opportunity to now redo Bel Air in a deeper, richer way than what Fresh
Deeper
Prince.
and richer. That's yeah.
I
There we
think that
go.
that's really good, and I'm going to watch it, and I hope that it's going to be great. But man, I would love more things like Lovecraft Country and more things like Us and get out newer stories that aren't just revamps
Well, I
of
mean, I think Peel he's redoing Candyman. Not that you're into horror or anything, but
no.
that was a
So he's
pinnacle.
producing it. It's a black chick that's directing it. So he's not directing that one. But
No,
he's,
but
and
he's
yes,
involved
that
in
is
that.
happening. But guess what? Indie Candyman redone.
Well, I mean, did you even watch them?
The first one and nearly pissed my pants. Actually, I'm pretty sure that I did piss my pants.
Okay,
I
well,
was
I mean,
little. And we
I mean,
watched it at like one of the 2 sleepovers I was ever allowed to go to in my life.
I'm sorry. That
It
was not the
scared
place for that to
the
happen.
the Jesus out of me because all these bitches running around going, "Ooh, let's go to the mirror and say." I was like, "Bitch, did
Yeah,
you just watch
no.
the same movie that I watched? Just take your ass to bed before you get us out guilt and shit." I was an impressionable young youth, right? But again, for me, I don't need the remake. I guess I'm at the point where I'm done with the remake. I want the more, yeah, sets, like you said, more original IP, to put it in
Okay.
the different way. I don't need a story retold. Okay, tale as old as time. Got it. Like Disney, I'm done with you doing the remakes of your old movies. Make some new shit. New shit, please.
Well, I mean,
Okay,
we're getting, well, no, that's more Pixar, actually, correction.
new verses, please.
Because we're getting Soul, which
Soul
is,
is
but
new.
that's Pixar. But that's
Okay,
Pixar,
but
I
that's
think.
Pixar. I mean, it's Disney Pixar, but it's Pixar. Okay, they're still trying to get me to float them $30 for their live action Mulan, and I was like, I'm
No,
sorry, I
no.
already have Mulan. I already
Also,
have
they took out the best parts of Mulan from this version. I have no desire to
Mulan.
watch it.
I'm sorry if I
Zero.
don't have the "I Will Make a Man Out of You" song. It's not Mulan. New verses, please.
No, there's no music. There is.
That's
It's
what I'm saying.
not. It's not a
I
mute. There's
know.
no music,
I know. I
and there's
know.
no subplot of like.
And that's why I know Bob.
Yeah,
That's why
I
I know
don't. I don't
Bob.
prescribe to it. I don't
Okay?
subscribe to it. It can move on.
Just like, I didn't watch any of the live action remakes that they've done of the movies that they've done because guess what? I already saw those movies.
So wait, you didn't watch Maleficent? You did not find
No,
that
wait,
nuanced enough?
hold on.
Because
I
even though it,
watched, wait. So Maleficent, I did watch the first one.
okay,
I own it.
okay.
But that Maleficent story that's in that live action is not a remake of the movie. Like, Maleficent is the only one that's not a remake because the story is different.
Well, I mean, I thought the second one kind of dabbles into the
Haven't
timeline
watched
of
the
Sleeping
second one.
Beauty.
Haven't watched the
All
second.
right.
But
The
the
second one
first
I think
one,
does. I think it does pan into what happens in Sleeping Beauty. So it's
yes, I
happening
haven't
in
watched that.
tandem too.
So I didn't watch it. I don't own it or whatever. But Maleficent, which I did watch, specifically I watched because it wasn't just Sleeping Beauty, but made live.
Okay.
It wasn't
So you didn't
Sleeping.
watch Cinderella. You didn't watch
Nope.
okay.
Didn't watch the
Beauty
Mary
and the
Poppins
Beast.
remake. Didn't watch the Beauty and Beast
I
remake.
didn't watch the Mary
Didn't
Poppins
watch
remake
the
either.
CGI animated live action, but not actually live action weird animal Lion King one. I haven't watched any of them. Or Aladdin, none of them. I watched the originals. I had those experiences. I know those stories. I know those characters. I didn't need them redone just with new tech and new people. And I think that's one of the things, especially when you have animation, that it's very difficult
I think
because
it's hard to translate animation into live action. I
I
think when
think
you
you can do animation into live action. I think the problem is from a consumer standpoint, if the original animation resonated with me, it then imprinted on me that this character looks this way and it sounds this way because that's this character. Like, to me, as an example, okay, Mufasa can't sound like or be done by anybody else other than James Earl
James
Jones.
Earl Jones. Yep.
That's Mufasa.
Got it.
Like, that's Mufasa. And
Got it.
so, you know, the same thing with all of the other characters. So when you start bringing in other voice actors, or you have a character look a different way or sound a different way, then my nostalgia more times it doesn't work. There are exceptions that prove the rule. Okay, like the one exception that I'll make isn't necessarily like a traditional remake, but it did happen. So which I hate that I'm going to bring this up because I hate the platform, Quibi. But did you see that a bunch of different actors, while stuck in quarantine, basically redid The Princess Bride? But
No.
yeah, so it's a Quibi thing. You can actually, I think you can still donate to charity and then get the video, but they all shot it from like their own smartphones or webcams or whatever with their own made up costumes. So, but it was like everybody, including some of the original people who were in it, but playing different roles that they
Oh,
picked
okay.
themselves. And so it's just, it's like literally the Princess Bride at home, like recut.
Because they're redoing it with Joe Jonas and his wife. It's Sophie Turner and her husband as Buttercup and Wesley. That is a thing. It is happening. I know. I know. I know.
Okay.
I know. I will not
I don't know if you heard
be
my
posting
grumbling
that.
enough on my mic. I may have had to turn my gain up. That's just another thing that I'm not going to support. Not because I don't love Sophie Turner. I do love Sophie Turner.
Me too.
Um, but like, just stop. Just stop with the remakes. New IP, please. New stories. There are plenty of stories that are out there that probably are not perfect, but with the right teams behind them, can become great series, shows, movies, all those kinds of things that could be representative of so many other voices.
Out with the old guard, in with the
Like
new.
I can't tell you how much I fucking enjoyed Crazy Rich Asians, and not just because I read the
Heck
book, but
yeah.
when I thought it was going to be a movie, I was like, yes, praise the Lord Jesus, finally. And then the other side was like, please, 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 just let audiences support this thing in the way that they should. And I was glad to see that they did, because then that makes it easier and opens the door for even more of that to happen, because it proves that it can be successful. So the main reason why this episode was called I Feel Seen is because I'm starting to feel seen, and I hope that other people who are in communities that are not necessarily the majority are also starting to feel seen by other markets than just their home market, or even seen in a better and different light in their home market. I definitely feel, to your point, where Blackish is now,
Now.
having Insecure, now,
Now.
now, um, not so much Grownish, but I have my own issues with that.
I stopped after Blackish. I did not
Okay.
go into Grownish or
Um,
Mixedish. I think there's some
I
issues
no, I
there.
didn't. I don't. Yep.
I
I
don't
don't.
think they had the right attack on
I've
either of
only
those.
watched a couple of episodes of Mixed Dish, and I was like, this is not for me. And I tried real hard to give
I
Grownish a
I
season because I
I
love
wanted
Yard.
mixed dish to be the thing because obviously both you and I are biracial, and I was like, ooh, there are so many nuggets of stories that never really get put into the mainstream, and I'm like, ooh, maybe this will be the vessel, and it's not, and that's okay because that just means that the vessel has yet to rise from the ashes and to bring forth the wisdom about those
Oh
experiences
yeah,
and those stories.
it's my favorite way right now to fuck with people who don't know me when they ask the stupid question of like, oh, so well, first it's where are you from, and then I usually say Massachusetts, and then like no, like where are your people from, and then I go Scotland, and then that's my favorite way to fuck with people right now, because I'm just like, just ask me, do you identify as black, or are you mixed or something, because there's something in there. Don't tippy toe around it. I ain't got time for that bullshit and that conversation. So now I just say, first I say that I'm from typically Boston, and then we're like,
Yep.
well, where are your people from? I say Scotland.
I get people who think I'm Dominican Republic a lot.
Well, there are some photos that you have of yourself where I'm like, you do kind
Yeah.
of look like you're from the DR.
Uh,
And that's not a bad thing, because guess
it's
what?
not.
Dominican,
It's not. I'm
you're
not
black.
saying that, but I'm just
You're black.
like, that's the
You're
first
black.
place people go.
By the
So,
way, Dominicans, you're black, just in case you didn't know. Um, that's how the boats went. You're black. Anyway, um, just clearing that up because there's some that are a little confused. Just helping you out there.
anyway.
But I do feel like now we are in a place where deeper, richer, and frankly better representations of the breadth of what the Black experience is in America is like
I
are
mean, I
now
just think
starting.
other experience. Just, I mean, obviously, you'd
I
like to see
can't
more of
speak
us.
completely for other. I mean, but I do feel like there are nuggets of that. But again, it's just like it's the door opening bigger for
Yeah,
everybody else, right? You have deeper, richer Black stories. You're now starting to see more LGBTQIA stories and platforms coming up, which again are far from perfect. And I can't speak for them because it's not my experience. I have friends that I have asked really uncomfortable conversation questions for me, but I really wanted to understand and get a better understanding. But you do have, the better things. It's just like, drama nerds will tell you Glee ain't it, but
no,
you'd rather have a Glee than not.
I would rather have Glee than both seasons of Smash.
Thank you.
Give
Right?
me all 6 seasons of Glee and just
But
eradicate Smash, please.
you have to appreciate Glee because Glee opened the door for Pose.
Yep, it sure did.
Don't get a Pose if Ryan,
Murphy.
yes, didn't get Glee and wasn't successful with Glee. You never get Pose.
I mean, he was successful with Glee and American Horror Story.
Right.
So I mean, he kind of had those two under his belt before Pose.
But you don't get Pose without Glee because you
You
can't
don't.
sell ballroom music drag queen is going to work if you don't sell, oh, people actually will sit through a musical number.
Right. No, you're right, Rochelle, you're right. But I
And
mean,
so
I like Glee, so every year I watch all of Glee at least once. My
I
husband
I
hates it.
like I like Glee up until like the end, but it's hard to end
Yeah,
any.
last season is rough. Last
It's
season is
it's
rough.
rough. It's rough, but it's hard to end any season, especially when you go through, a series that frankly they've had so many things,
Horrible
negatively.
things
Yeah,
happen.
that happen.
Yeah.
It's just it's hard when you've probably written a story one way and now you have to completely upend it because you've lost an actor and it's an actor that can't be replaced. Like you can't.
Placed. Oh
Yeah,
God,
you know
I'm
what
so glad they didn't even attempt that. I'm so glad that
I mean?
they went the avenue that they did because the backlash would have been insurmountable.
But if Glee's not successful, and you don't have it, then you also can't convince Fox to do Empire, which is basically just Black
Black
Dynasty.
Dallas.
Yeah,
Black
it is.
Dynasty.
I was gonna
Black
say
Dallas.
Dynasty, but it does have a little
Little.
more violence than Dynasty has. So yeah, it's Black Dallas.
Black Dallas.
Um,
Whoop
but
whoop. Empire.
right, but Empire and Power, what do they open the door for? What
I'm
you
looking
know,
forward to finding out.
I'm looking forward to finding out as well because it does. At the end of the day, the more representation, the better because there's more chances to get it right. And for all the tropey things that Empire has done,
And they're in there.
and
There's no denying that.
they're in there for sure. It also is a reassuring thing to see a half hour of television that happens with a fully Black cast where there's
Oh, actually,
interest.
there was a white lady, but she died
I mean,
in the story.
there have been
Andre's wife. She
people.
died. They
Andre's
killed her
wife,
off. Yeah.
and
And
then
then
what's
Tracy, she
Tracy,
died too.
and then the rapper dude that was trying to get with what's her
Yeah.
face.
Oh yeah, he gone too. He didn't die. He just got written out. And
Yeah,
then Rumor Willis, her character, she died in the show. Like they kill a lot of white women in Empire now that I think about it. There's like 3.
um,
I'm not a part of that writing room, so I don't know what the point of that is, but okay.
but it is really great and refreshing to see complex characters and complex situations being written and delivered on a mainstream channel in prime time, being successful over and over again. And that does open up so many doors, not just for writers, but also for producers, for actors, for a space for more stories that are more diverse to be told, and for more networks and for more, production companies and distributors and other networks, because, we now don't have to just rely on broadcast television. You got Netflix out here that's just like trying to make it rain on content because they need it, and specifically putting out a call for more writers, screenplays, and content coming from more diverse voices, particularly in the Black and LGBTQIA community. That's a good thing,
I
because then that
agree.
means that we get to be seen. The more and more that these get picked up, and for all the things that they get wrong or they miss or they just are surface, it just means the next thing that comes gets to go a little bit deeper. And that's one of the big things that, like, I really took away as I started to do my research for this conversation, was just how much everything that came before just push the door a little more and push the door a little more and push the door a little more. And now we have a How to Get Away with a Murder. And we have, now a Insecure versus a 227 or a Different Strokes or a Silver Spoons or those kinds of things. They all built upon the thing that came before. You don't have a Martin if you don't have a Sanford and Son. You don't have an Insecure if you don't have Julia. You don't have all of these things that now we rave about, and we're so excited because they feel more real. They feel more rich. They feel more deep. And it's because the other things
They connect and I can tune in.
and made the space deeper and allowed for that to happen. So not only do I just want to give credit where credit is due, I want to say that, yeah, like, I do feel seen more. Okay, the fact that we have this channel, this platform to talk about this stuff, and there are people who come along for the conversation with us and enjoy it, and that we have a space to be Black women talking about these things as opposed to just on the phone bullshitting about them, is
Yep,
amazing.
I agree. It's
You know,
nice to be able to talk about these things because I don't get I don't have the option to always do it in my day-to-day life. So this
and
is nice.
here we are. We, in essence, we have our TV show to do this, and there are people who come along for the journey and enjoy it and have the conversation, and we're building a community around it, and that's an amazing place to be. And it wasn't something that could have been done 15 years ago.
Absolutely not.
We have blurred cons, even though I hate the word blurred. We'll talk about that sometime. But we have them. We have Wakanda Con. You have, as you mentioned, space in sci-fi now for more and other. That's a
Like
great.
thank you Deep Space was it Deep Space 9 with
I
Cisco?
don't, I don't know that anybody really should say thank you, Deep Space Nine,
Hey.
except for, look, look. I know. You know what? Maybe we should just do an episode on DS9, because this is gonna take a little bit, because we got to unpack a lot.
Yeah,
We
you're
got
right.
a lot.
That requires its own episode.
It does, because there's a lot of unpacking that has to happen there.
You're right. Blacks
So
and
let
sci-fi next tribunal.
maybe we will. Maybe that should be the next one,
Maybe that should be
because
it.
there's a lot of unpacking to do there.
Okay.
So, yeah, because we would be here another hour if we start going down that road. So we'll put a pin in that.
We're gonna table it for right now.
We're gonna circle it. We're gonna come back to it. But for now, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so glad that we did it. I'm so glad that you guys joined us for the conversation today, and definitely keep the conversation going. This is, I think, one of those topics where we can definitely come back and, pick even more things up, because we focus primarily on TV today in the conversation, but I think that we can absolutely do this with books, and we can absolutely do this with movies. And I would just love to hear, some of your thoughts around, feeling seen in the media that you consume and how important it is, because I can tell you absolutely unequivocally all the things that I ended up watching on TV as a kid absolutely flavored the woman that I am today, because there are definite bars and of measurement and accomplishment that I have in my head ingrained as, places to go and be the definitive, like, this is success, this is good, this is these things, because of, things that I learned from my family and environment, but also because of the media that I consumed as a kid. And therapy helps me unpack a lot of those things.
Me
Um,
too.
but they are there, and they do absolutely, to be completely transparent, flavor who I am today. But hopefully don't necessarily define who I am tomorrow. So I would love to continue to have this kind of conversation, because I think the more that we talk about it, the better we understand it and understand ourselves. And that's really the path to,
Self
community.
actualization.
I was just gonna say
Top
community
of
and
the
togetherness,
pyramid.
but also, yes, that. Um, pyramid. Um,
Pyramid.
Illuminati confirmed. Um, but it's been a great episode, sis. I've really loved this conversation. So before I do the business to wrap us up, is there anything that you would like to say?
I mean, if you don't catch me here, you can catch me on the Geek Down on Saturdays, every other Saturday with my team over there. Well, they're
I
not my
feel like
team. I'm a part of
that's
their
like
team.
the least confident plug I've ever heard someone do
We
for
we just we
something.
just we just rolled it back up over at the Geek Down. We talk about geeky things, but it's not mine. I'm just a part of that crew. They're pretty awesome. Come check me out. I'll put some blurbs up on Black and Pat about that, and you can go check that out.
It's like you've never done a promo before.
I usually write them down. You threw me on the spot.
So,
Next
yeah,
next my next one in 2 weeks will be so much better, I promise.
I kind of sort of do this other thing. You should check it
It's
out.
like I'm there too, I guess.
Question mark?
Well, shit.
Oh shit. You crack me up, you crack me up. So as I said, we're wrapping up here. It's been a great conversation. You can check us out as we stream live every Wednesday night and Friday night here on our Twitch channel. On Wednesday night, you can join me for the wind down from 7 to 9. We just hang out. It's a cool, chill, community vibe kind of night. Sometimes I have a specific topic that I want to talk about. Sometimes I play games. Most of the time, we just vibe, have conversation, talk some shit, and have a good time for a little bit, to really wind down your hump day to get you ready to get through the rest of the week. And then on Fridays right now, you can join Amanda as she's playing through 2 games now. So
Yep.
every other week, it's either a new episode of her continuing playthrough of The Last of Us Part 2, or her new playthrough of Man of Medan, which freaks me the hell out. So you can join me in chat as I freak out over all the jump scares, because I don't like jump scares. And knowing this, she decides to play one of the biggest games full of jump scares. So you can join my scaredy butt in chat on Friday.
I'm kiboshing that. This Man of Medan is not the most jump scary game. If I really wanted to scare you,
don't do it. Don't do it.
I'm just telling you, there are so many other games that are far
Just-
more terrifying
just
than
don't.
Man of Medan is.
Okay,
But
because
anyway,
I'm just going to tell you right now, if you do decide at some point to play through the Resident Evil game that's coming out, Village, you're going to have to find somebody else to mod your chat, because I don't think I can do it. Because
I actually think I want to play Medium on our stream when that comes out. The duality is just too enticing for me. But anyway,
I know,
that's down the road.
You can catch Manda playing new games, either The Last of Us 2 or Man of Medan, here on our Twitch channel. So am I doing the out or you? Like, who's doing
you do the out.
Okay, because it sounded like you was joining in.
I mean, I always do, right?
No? Okay. All right, cool. So you catch her on Friday nights from 7 to 9 playing one of those 2 games, and join me in chat. If she's playing Last of Us 2, I'm giving her tips and tricks to help her get through the level. If she's playing Man of Medan, I'm like this in the chat, but you can't see me, but I'm like this in the chat. So join me. It'll be a good time. And then every other Sunday, you can catch us here on Twitch doing a tribunal at 3 p.m. Eastern. All of our times are Eastern. Here on the Tribunal, we just talk about some real things that are weighing on our mind, having great conversations that we hope that you enjoy and will join and be a part of as we move our channel forward. While you can catch us here on Twitch, twitch.tv/blackandpat. I'm going to have to update this and put the little bar there at the top so you'll know the address. You can also interact with us on our social, and please do. We love getting questions from you guys and just talking with you about random stuff. We also put out our streaming schedule each week on our social channels, so you can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Black Compat. You can also check out our YouTube channel and subscribe over there. That's where we put all of our VODs for our content. I'm way behind on editing because my poor computer can barely keep up with things. But I'm going to do my best to try and get a couple more videos out in the next couple of weeks, as my new computer has been slightly delayed in getting to me. So it's going to be a little bit longer than I thought for getting our VODs up. But catch us live here on Twitch and catch the VODs on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/backcompat. And we also have a website, which we have not put anything new up on a while, but we're going to get better about that as well, blackcompat.com. So you can get in touch with us a slew of different ways. If there's a topic that you'd like to suggest for us to talk about, either on a tribunal or on one of our streaming nights, please hit us up on any of our social channels or through our website, where you can comment on the posts that we have and just let us know, like, hey, Ro and Amanda, I think this would be a great one for you to talk about. And we'll give you a shout out if we pick your topic and we talk about it. So it's time to wrap it up. I'm Ro.
And I'm Amanda.
Always and.
Never or.
Until next time, folks. Bye.
Bye, guys.